then like that second night you're going to bed and you're like, what if I'm like one of these long COVID people? Like, what if I have this shit for a month? What if I don't get home? You
What if I'm a
start
long
panicking
hauler?
yourself. What if,
Yeah.
and like I'm watching TV and it's like record Omicron case, coming every day. And I'm like, what if Biden puts a lockdown? What if he says no one's getting into which that happened the first time COVID happened.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you tardy son of a bitch.
I am not late. That is not true. I was on here on time. I said, let's go. And you said, give me a minute. So I would like to rebuttal your accusation.
I figured you would.
I know it took you a while to get as dressed up as handsomely as you are in that nice sweater today. You look very warm.
It's awesome. And then it's got like multicolors. It's great.
I don't care how cold it is in your office. You will be sweating by the end of this episode. There's no doubt.
That's possibly true. And it's also, it's winter for us in the Northern Hemisphere. I have the heat and everything off and there's just cold air oozing in. So this is why I'm dressed like a polar bear. For those of you not blessed enough to see us, but only hearing us.
The program with Frankie, his sweat comes very easily to him. No one sweats like that dude.
There's no question.
So, Frankie, we talked a little bit in the last episode about your fun Christmas, which was eventful, which ended in a private plane and a 5-hour drive from Dulles just to get home.
With Christmas 2 kids, 3 and under. Great.
The Christmas was just about as special as yours. It's quite interesting. It was a little different than yours, but I would say one of the more eventful holidays of the esteemed holiday career of Ian Mathews. I must say that.
So back in the old days, for those of you that have been tracking our histories, Ian and his family would go to like all these incredible places. Like he sent me pictures like of a half drank Pacifico with like an incredible, book next to a hot tub, but a plunge tub, like overlooking these beautiful scenes in the Pacific. And I'm like, where do you even find these places to go? And I feel like COVID got in the way of that this year for you, big guy.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tradition in our family. I got to give my wife credit for it. She's kind of the spearhead of this, but both of us. So I grew up in Michigan. Jenny grew up in Chicago. So we grew up with white Christmases, snow, freezing cold, going to church early in the morning. And ever since we got married, we have gone somewhere warm for every holiday. So Aruba, we've been to Dominican, been to Mexico. We used to go to Aruba. Like I think we went there 6 or 7 years in a row. And then we had kids. We just kind of kept doing it. And our kids, for the first few years of their life, we would just lie to them and say it's Christmas like 3 days before. And Santa came last night because they didn't know any better. So, then we'd get there and there'd be another Christmas and they'd just think this was amazing. So my kids, I think maybe IJ's 11. Maybe he's woken up on actual Christmas twice in his own house. I mean, we're always somewhere warm, tropical. And we went for it this year. So we, even with all the COVID and everything, we went with Jenny's whole family. So there were 17 of us. We went to Playa del Carmen, stayed at a really cool, all-inclusive. It wasn't that weird. I mean, you're walking around with your masks on and you had some of that with COVID. You had the protocols but for the most part, it still felt like Mexico. You're still drinking beer. You were still in a pool, still eating a lot of beans. And I like beans, Frank.
I love beans until they take hold of me.
So we're there and we're there for a week and like with a day left in the trip, I start sniffling and coughing. And I'm like,
was it the beans?
it wasn't the beans. Beans don't do.
Was
They
it
don't have that
the
effect
was
on
it the
me.
onions? Because you're lactose
I'm
intolerant.
lactose intolerant, so beans can really tear me up. But this wasn't it. This wasn't the normal bean lactose intolerance that I was going through. And I'm like, I don't know about this. Maybe I just have a cold, because it was really, it was lame. It was a cold. I had a tickle in my throat, so it made me cough. But to be safe, the last day I didn't see anybody. I just stayed in the hotel room all day. And Jenny's parents, they're like, that's silly, come on out and hang out. And I'm like, I'm just gonna stay in the hotel room all day. So that's what I did. And currently the United States has a rule that if you are anywhere international, you have to prove that you don't have COVID. So you have to show a test within 24 hours of departing back to the United States. And so most hotels internationally are going to let that we had to do this when we went to we spent July in Greece. Same thing happened. The hotel brought a doctor to your room and get administered a test. And by now everyone has those little take-home tests you can get and see if it's 1 or 2 lines. So our whole
I'm not sure if that's true, Ian, if everyone has those tests. There was news this morning, the US government is going to issue 500 million masks. Like, we've all been waiting at home for the US government to give us masks. We could all go about our lives.
It feels a bit late. It feels a bit late
Yeah.
to be getting masks. I know that's Joe Biden's big boom. He's really excited about that. I think the country responded with a collective yawn when they heard old Sleepy Joe roll out that great plan 2 years into this. But anyway, those little, COVID tests where you stick the little swab up your nose. So, we go down there, we set up all these tests, and we've already had a couple family members leave, and it was no incident. They just left. And so 17 of us get tested. They come, each family goes in, gets a swab up their both noses. The kids are hating it. Their eyes are watering. They're crying and complaining about having to get a test. So everyone's getting told, okay, you can go. Here's the email. It's kind of an administrative effort. And then a guy pulls me aside and says, sir, we need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. This sucks. So he pulls me aside and he says, 3 members of your family tested negative, but 1 has COVID. And I'm like, who? Like, what's going on? And he says, you. So I have COVID. I've tested positive now, and I'm in Mexico. And I'm like, so what does this mean? And I'm not losing
You're
my
not
shit.
going
I'm just
home
like,
for a while.
I'm like, you guys are testing hundreds of people a day. Like, I'm not the only person. This has got to be happening regularly. And he says, well, wait here. We're gonna have someone come talk to you. And so, a young lady comes over to talk to me, and she's so nervous. You could just see it. I'm like, well, okay. What does all this mean? I don't understand what is next. I'm checking out tomorrow. Do you have like a wing for people like me that have to hang out? And that's what almost I ended up doing like hours of research on this. So what most hotels would do is they just put you in the COVID wing. And apparently there's lots of people that are in these COVID wings, and they take away your key and they quarantine you in your room, and they bring you whatever food you want. They either give you like a discounted rate or like a meal package. Some of them don't charge you anything because it's already been crappy enough for you. But they try to at least keep you contained. So I said, okay, what does this mean? Right? Because I'm leaving tomorrow. She said, well, we don't have any availability. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have any availability? Just yesterday, my wife was checking to see if we could stay an extra 3 days, and you gave her like 6 different options of rooms for the next 3 days. So are you saying you don't have availability for people with COVID? And she she mumbled her way around it. It was like, the rooms and room availability and people. And I'm like, I need you to just be straight with me. Are you saying that your policy is when someone gets a positive test, you boot them out of the hotel? I just need to know that, because I need to go how to react after this. Because, if I went and talked to your front desk, they would tell me there's rooms. And then she finally kind of fessed up and was like, yeah, that's kind of our policy. And I was like, uh, okay, so
And
now
now so you're in Mexico. Is this someone who's Mexican? Is this like an American girl working at a Mexican hotel? Like,
yeah, so I'm
who
trying
is the
not to
person?
insult Mexicans by doing my terrible Spanish accent, but she was speaking in broken English Spanish, right? So she's a
This is
Mexican
when it's fun.
person.
This is when it's fun to have my wife on these trips, because my wife speaks perfect Spanish, and it's kind of like the difference between you and me speaking English. You know this, and her speaking Spanish. Like when she speaks Spanish, it's almost like you hear someone British. So there's like this immediate like authority. She like interrupts the people. Like, I didn't expect to see that coming, but you, my friend, with your 8th grade Spanish, were screwed.
I absolutely could have used Ellie on this trip because I was trying to explain how frustrated I was with their policies. Um, Mind you, at this point, my symptoms are like a tickle in my throat. I have like, there's nothing wrong with me. So I'm just frustrated and I'm stuck here. And part of it is you're frustrated with yourself. You're like, what the fuck am I doing in Mexico? Like during a pandemic? Why? Like, damn it, it finally caught me, because Jenny and I have been playing it fast and loose the whole time, traveling wherever we want. And this one finally bit me. But so I'm the only one out of 17 that tests for COVID at this point. And so I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. Jenny's trying to figure out, do you want us to stay with you? And the answer to that is decidedly no. You need to get the hell out of here, because the longer you stick around me, we could end up being here for weeks because one of us keeps getting sick. So you got to go get on the plane, stay away from me. And I got to go figure out what to do. But it was, Frankie, it was one of those deals where if you just look at it from this is a really nice hotel. I mean, a high-end place. It's not your typical all-inclusive that's giving you a cheap beer. Like, this was a nice joint. And one, they sent someone to talk to me who didn't speak the greatest English and was clearly really nervous to tell me this, right? It was clearly, she was really nervous. And I don't, you and I have both been in industries where emotions get really raw, especially around the settlement day, or when you have to tell someone that they can't have the options they want, or the options they ordered are not going to be available. We're not going to get those cabinets in time, or, you're in an industry where you have to go give bad news. I've lived in an industry where I've had to give bad news, where I've had to tell someone, I'm sorry that you're out of your house. You're not closing for another week because we screwed up. So we're going to put you in a hotel with your 7 kids. Like, I've had those conversations. And for me, when you're running a business, if you know those kind of conversations are going to come up, I think the only thing you can do as a business owner or a manager is to practice those scenarios all the time. So we used to role play that discussion all the time. Where you would have to tell me, the angry customer, that I was not closing on time. And you would have to give me the news and get me over the denial curve. And it was really clear that this company was ill prepared for it and wasn't training their folks, wasn't preparing them for this discussion, because you could just, I never lost my voice, I never lost my cool, but I felt for her. Like, I hated their policies, but I felt even madder at their company for sending this young girl to deliver news that she was so uncomfortable delivering and ill prepared to say what she should say. They hadn't prepped her.
That's what I was about to say, is she's ill prepared, right? Like, we're business owners, we're long since seasoned managers. And when you see somebody like that, the failing is on the organization where they're employed, not on the employee. She's just doing the best she can with what she's been dealt.
Yeah. It was, and to me, the policy sucked. Like, so it was like, well, we don't have rooms, which is a lie. And I know it's a lie. So if your policy is, we have to protect the other guests. And so if we know that you've tested positive for COVID, we do ask that you go. If that's your policy, I think, Frank, you'd probably be the same with me. I respect you more if you look me right in the eyes and say, that's our policy. There are hundreds of people in this hotel, and we have to protect all of them from a breakout. We're going to try to make this as comfortable and seamless as possible, but our policy is you can't stay. but they kind of lied about it. They said, we don't have any rooms left after I had just asked about extra rooms. So I was very frustrated about that.
The lesson in it, and I don't know what it is about society with this, but this is the God's honest truth, right? Like there was a period in my life where I realized just coming out and saying it is so much better than any other alternative. But like, why isn't there a well-crafted message around, Mr. Mathews, you've tested positive for COVID. We aren't built adequately in a way where we can keep you away from guests, and we're afraid we're going to spread it. We've reached out to these 4 hotels who are set up better than us, where you can easily check in.
Thank you.
Right.
Like there was no, so, she kind of mumbled like a half-assed, we've had some other guests go get Airbnbs. She just kind of mumbled that. And it was like, how is that? I would think they would have like a list, here are the numbers to call, or we have one person dedicated to getting people. Like, you got to leave our property. That's our site. So most hotels had a wing and they tried to control it, and that's cool. But if that's not your policy, I understand that. That's a lot of work. It's hard to contain it.
And not every property is built the same. Like, you might not have the ability to quarantine somebody. Like, certain places have wings, some places don't.
Yeah, but to me, here's the way I see it. So I'm a big boy. I knew this was a risk when I went, and I'm dealing with it. It's like, okay, I'm dealing with this. But you're a hotel running in the middle of COVID. You know the risks that people are going to get COVID at your hotel. You should have policies that are helpful to the people that it happens to. You can't have well, that sucks for them attitude when it does happen. And so now my family's out kind of like hanging out all day while I'm sitting in the room, like trying to find out where I'm going to go stay. And I'm getting texts all day saying, oh yeah, I just ran into another mom whose husband's in the room because he's got COVID. Apparently. So then I when I was leaving, I'm talking to the bellboy who came over to get me, and he's super nice. He knows that I've got COVID. So he's got they got special handlers for this. And he's like, oh yeah, it's probably a dozen every morning that are testing positive that I have to have this discussion with, where do I go? And it's like, if this is happening, it's Omicron, like this is the biggest surge. You should just have policy. Maybe one person is dedicated to just showing you, here's the resources, here's where you can go, here's what you can do. But it's similar to me, it's like a termination. It's like when you have to say goodbye to someone for a lack of work or for whatever reason, you give them some paperwork. Here's a number to call about Cobra. Here's what you can do about your unemployment benefits. Here's what here's when your next check is going to come. Here's what you give them some numbers to call, so that, to me, I think the most important with that is when you do a termination is you give me some action to take. The worst part is just being like, I don't know what to do. Give me some things to go, some tasks to go do to break the inertia. But I didn't have any of that. So I had to go find a hotel on my own. And I didn't know, do they all share these tests? Like, where am I going to stay? I'm in Mexico. Like, I don't know where I'm going to stay. So I ended up finding a real dump. I found a real dump of a hotel to just try to get my way through it. I'm
thinking that sarcastic. You sent me some pictures from this place. Looked like you had your own personal pool.
That was important to me. I didn't go at the top end, but it did have to have its own pool and kind of backyard. It needed to be a villa of some kind. So the funny thing is, like, it went from like
talk about really connecting to our listeners. Yes. You're talking about your $1,000 a night quarantine hotel while you're in Mexico.
This is at the same time that Frank is paying $6,000 for fuel for a flight to come get him in Westchester.
None of the details are accurate. It was 9.
Close enough. It was 9. So I've got COVID. I don't know if I'm going to be stuck in Mexico for a day, for a week, for 2 weeks. So screw it. I'm stuck here by myself. I'm pissed off. I go find the Viceroy, which has its own like private villa. So yes, I have a pool, like a hammock, got out nice reading area outside, big ass room, private butler. It was a very, very nice accommodation. So it was hilarious. It went from like everyone's worried about Ian, like, oh shit, Ian's got COVID. This sucks. What are we going to do? How's he going to get home? To everyone's jealous that Ian's still in Mexico because I'm sending pictures of myself drinking in a pool, quarantining, drinking Pacificos. I'm watching, I was there for New Year's Eve. So I'm watching all the bowl games from my hammock outside while I think I read like 3 books over 3 days. It was one of the most delightful quarantines anyone could possibly imagine.
My wife was so pissed at me when I got COVID because like I went up, like it actually affected me and I didn't feel really good. I ended up going to the hospital for a day. And like we have, at the point we had 2 kids under 3. And I end up like upstairs in our bedroom in like an extra room off the bedroom that has a TV. So I'm like on the couch watching TV, reading books, relaxing. She's downstairs dealing with 2 kids, bringing me food up whenever I would text and leaving it by the door so I wouldn't have to come see anybody. So it's like our wives have definitely gotten the worst part of this. I want to add one other thing in this, Ian, because it's interesting. So like the international travel piece, it's a risk. It's a real risk. And when you travel to different countries, like I'm pretty good at navigating the US. Like I'm really good at it. Like airlines, airports, like how to do it. I'm great in America. I absolutely suck in other parts of the world. Like whenever we go to Europe, like I get behind my wife and let her take charge because she has European sensibilities. Like she understands how they reason and logic. So like the fact that you were trapped there in a country that isn't America with thought processes that aren't ours, it's so frustrating. You're like, why don't you just do it this way? But they're fundamentally set up differently, so they run differently. Plus, like you know what I mean? It's incredible.
I like 4 years ago, I was in Germany with David for Code Guard. And we were there for a conference. It's a story we need to tell on this show one time because it was amazing 4 days. But we killed it, and we were supposed to be there an extra day at the conference. And we said, screw it. We can only screw up at this point. Let's get out of here. Let's go to Berlin. And so we just went to the train station, speaking of like being in Europe. And we get there, and like Germans are German. They're not there to help you with your English. Like they're German. Like you're talking to people, and I took German 4 years in high school and I don't speak shit of it. And we're reading like go to the
you
train
have always
station,
been an overachiever.
There's no one there to help you. Like the train station's all automated. You're punching in the different, station you want to go to. It's all written in German. We stared at it for 30. We missed like an entire train, had to sit for another 45 minutes because we couldn't understand what the hell it meant. And there is no one there to help you. We end up getting someone who finally, after like the 12th person we asked, someone nice enough to tell us like, here's how to get to Berlin. And it, same Europe, they do not care. If you go to Italy's a little easier. I thought Spain was pretty easy to get around. Germany's really hard. England, obviously easy. France doesn't give a shit. France doesn't give a shit if you can't read their train stations or how to get anywhere. The
countries that are helpful in Europe are the ones that have the worst GDPs and really rely on you. Right. They really rely on transportation and tourism. But the northern countries, the Nordic countries, the others that they could give a rip. But I want to say one other thing real quick that I think is relevant to this. Then we're going to move this into Vegas, right? Because you had to get out of there to go to something pretty important. So one of the things as an employer right now that you're dealing with is the big resignation or the big quit. It's called both. And what it comes down to is people are just tired. Like I was in a meeting yesterday with one of our designers and she had a mask on. And I walked into the meeting. I was the last one to walk in. I said, are you radioactive? Are you afraid one of us is? And she's like, I'm going on vacation. I am insanely in need of a vacation. And I'm not catching anything before I go on this vacation. Like I am absolutely being very careful about anything. I'm like, do you want me to go put a mask on? She's like, if you're not sick, you don't need to. I asked, I like her. She's a nice person. I was like, do you want me to put a mask on? She's like, no, you don't need to. She's like, I just want to be cautious because I need a fucking break. Like I need a break. Like the things we used to do, like just go to a train station and get on a train to Berlin is now rife with all these problems. I had an opportunity to go to Mexico 90 to 120 days ago. the place was $7,000 a night for this house. And it was, I didn't have to do a thing. They were going to pay for my airline. They were going to pay for my transportation, everything, just get there. And after stranding my wife for 24 days with our kids when I had COVID, like I couldn't go. How could I possibly go on a trip that's a vacation where she's home with 2 kids and then possibly I don't get to come home, and then she's gonna be angry. So it's not a good partnership. But what I'm driving at with this is, I think this is why we are where we are right now. People are frustrated, tempers are high, people are quitting because it's everywhere you read it, but it's real. Like, just little things we used to be able to do that we now take for granted are now so much harder because of where we're at. And, thankfully, I can make fun of Ian. Thankfully, we're both in a position where when these things happen, we get to adapt and stay at the Viceroy. But like, a friend of mine travels back and forth to see his family in the Philippines, and he has to quarantine for 14, 15 days just to get into the country. It's like, it's incredible.
So Frankie, so like the first 24, 48 hours, it was cute. It was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Actually, I can't remember the last time I ate 6 straight meals without someone crawling on me, without someone bothering me or being in my ear chirping. Like, I ate 6 quiet meals, all
That's
room
what it's
service.
like hanging out with Ian. He's always all over me, spraying his sunscreen on my
burning everything. I haven't had 6 meals in a row, like by myself,
Right.
quiet, in, I don't know, 20 years. It feels like forever. So it was nice. But then, like, that second night, you're going to bed and you're like, what if I'm like one of these long COVID people? Like, what if I have this shit for a month? What if I don't get home? You
What if I'm
start
a long
panicking
hauler?
yourself. What if,
Yeah.
and like, I'm watching TV and it's like record Omicron case, coming every day. And I'm like, what if Biden puts a lockdown? What if he says no one's getting into which that happened the first time COVID happened. So now you start panicking. So I've got these take-home tests. Jenny left me with a bunch. And I finally take one. I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's no second line. I don't have, like, I haven't had symptoms in 3 days. I feel great. I'm going on like 5-6 mile runs on the beach. I'm feeling great. I got nothing else to do. I got nothing but time. I feel great. And
Nickel, that's a shout out to you, who had COVID and ran 8 miles a day.
yeah, no doubt. And he did it a lot faster than I did my 6 miles. I guarantee you. There's a lot of walking in mine for sure. I just want to hear this podcast. So I'm going to slow it down a little. I want to hear the whole episode.
Ooh, a shell.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, now I'm getting pissed. So every day I'm going downtown Playa del Carmen, and they have these little testing stations. And they're everywhere, Frank. They're pop-up stations. So the first day I probably spend like $200. I go into like 6 of them to get tests. And then like 15 minutes later, you get an email. It's like same thing everywhere. You go on, you scan a barcode, you go on your iPhone, you type in your information, passport stuff, and they stick a swab up your nose, and you get an email 15 minutes later, and it either says positivo or negativo. And all of mine are just positivo. So the first day I'm like, shit, 6 positive tests. I'm still positive. Screw it. Got back in to, a cab, went back to my hotel, and I'm scared I won't let the hotel test me. They're trying to set up a test. I'm like, nah, I'll do it myself. I'm good. Because I don't want them to boot me out of this place. I'm not saying shit to them. And so second day I go, I've tested, and I've tested in my hotel, and I have no 2 bars. So I'm like, shit, this will be great. I'm going to get a negative test. I go 3 places in a row, email me positive. And now I'm just starting to panic. So now I'm like Googling how to get a negative test. I bought a bunch of Listerine. I heard that would help. I was doing shots of Listerine in a alley, like an alcoholic. I'm like, not even gurgling. I'm swallowing it. So it's coming up when I breathe. I can, like, it's burning my nose. I snorted some Listerine. I was so desperate. I literally snorted Listerine up my nose. It was one of the stupidest things I ever did. Didn't do any help. And I tested, and I still got a positive. So like the third day I go, and I'm just so desperate that I'm starting to talk to these people in these places. Like, what's going on? Why are all these coming back? Is this a racket to keep us in the country? Like, I took 2 tests in my room. They're both negative. And I'm like, how do I get a negative test? I'm just starting to ask that. And I'm pulling the Frank Cava, I'm handing out hand undies to people to see how to get a negative test. And like at one
Now,
point,
hold on. Let's set the record straight. I usually do this because I'm trying to get 5 middle-aged dudes into a club in Vegas. That's when I'm handing out the hundreds.
hey, and it's effective and it works. So if hand hundies can get drunk Ian into a club, but he could barely stand, hand hundies should be able to get me a negative test to get home to America. So I'm asking this one guy's trying to give me like a phone number to contact this guy on WhatsApp. And I'm like, this is starting to feel like a drug deal. Like I can't do that. So I finally go in, I find a couple girls. I'm like, look, hey, really appreciate what you guys are doing. I give them both $100 right up front. And I'm like really excited to get my negative test. I'll be back if it's negative. I went to Senior Frogs, bought a beer, sat outside, waited, and I got an email with a negative COVID test. Went back, gave those 2 girls $200 more. They made $400 that day, and I was able to get home. The reason why I was so desperate is
do you think honestly you bought yourself a negative test?
I don't know, but I was desperate and I was throwing cash everywhere because I had literally built in my head this narrative that all these places are corrupt and they're trying to keep people here to keep getting them to keep testing. And
Were you just running around screaming cartel?
I couldn't understand it because my test in my room, I was shoving that thing up my nose and it was coming back negative 2 days in a row. And I'm like, why are these testing places giving me positives? This is bullshit. I have no symptoms. And you're getting pissed too, because I fly all over in America. No one makes you test in America. You fly to Vegas, you fly to Texas, you fly to Florida. No one makes you test there or coming back. This is just some international rule and I'm stuck here. So I don't know. I don't know where I bought it. It could have been my charm. A couple of young ladies. I put the charm on. I'm pretty good. I'd comb my hair nice that day.
I'm sure it was the money.
Think it was the money? I think it was probably the money.
Could
have been the money. Could have been the money.
I want to denigrate it to a funny story, but I'll just skip it.
Anyway, I was desperate because we were debuting the night, our car alarm at CES in Las Vegas. Like I was still in Mexico, and in 2 days, if I wouldn't have got that test, I wouldn't have made it to the media night, which was kind of the big night. David and I were going to be there, where all the media comes and you've got all the influencers, you've got the big media outlets that are looking at new product announcements. So I was desperate of like, how do I get my ass to Las Vegas? So, thankfully I got that test, got home. Next day I took another test. I went and got a test at a lab that came back that I was still negative. So I was like, cool, I'm going to Vegas. And ended up being an awesome trip for us, Frankie, because our product, which we've been working on for 3 years, this was very nerve-wracking for us. We rented a smart car and we put our car alarm inside of it that has multiple sensors. And can imagine at a huge fair like this, there's a lot of interference that could screw up sensors, lots of people walking back and forth, lots of ways this thing could not work. And man, like hundreds of people tested it, opened the door, the alarm went off. It went off without a hitch. It just worked. It was really cool event for everyone on our team. We brought 6 people from Keep, 4 engineers and me and David. Really good morale builder that our device just absolutely worked, and we had such a big bang at CES.
So what I think we've beat the COVID angle, right? Like everybody understands, everyone's got their own story about COVID. It's like it's ridiculous, but it's like we've dealt with it. So why was CES such a big deal? Like, what is CES? And then like, why was it a big deal? Why did you put so much stock in it? And why was it so important to be there?
So CES is the Consumer Electronics Show. It's every year. It's in Las Vegas. It's the biggest technology show in the world. It's, how like Apple does their event every year where Steve Jobs would unveil.
They do their annual. Yeah. I mean, if he was still coming, it'd be even more impressive, but it's every year they do a product launch, and they've been doing that since like the 80s.
So Apple's like the only company that anyone follows that does their own thing. You don't know of someone else doing that, right? Like, oh, the Microsoft product launch is coming, or the General Motors. For most companies, even the big ones, CES is where they debut new products. So like Microsoft's debuting their new Xbox games or their new Xbox in general. They're debuting their new Surface laptop. So big companies are there. But then there's this whole other conference that's within CES. It's the name of it is Eureka Park is where the location is. And that's where all the startups are, like the most disruptive startups, where they get a booth, and that area is completely packed with people just looking for new technology. And you've got distributors, you got retailers there that are looking to see new products they could pick up. You've got influencers there that have shows that are talking about the newest technology. Really high energy, huge show. And the people that are there have real credentials, they have credentials in the technology space. So for us, it was a big deal to debut there because we had to bring production devices. And, it's our device, it looks like an Alexa and it's a tech product. Up until now, we've been dealing with prototypes, and you can kind of use some smoke and mirrors to do your videos and show how it works. Sometimes you're backing it up with a power cord or a plug, or you're doing different things where you're hardwiring it to be able to show some of its capabilities. We had the actual device unwired, showing it to people, letting them touch it, handle it. We painted it. It just looked really good, and it had to work. We let people demo this over and over and over. And for our engineers who have been making this thing fail for 3 years on purpose, to try to test it in different ways, this was a really stressful moment for them to get ready for it. And, for it to work for 3 days of 8 hours a day in that booth was just phenomenal.
So what's next?
So a whole bunch of cool stuff came out of it, Frankie. I'll only talk about a couple of them. A marketing group that launches companies on QVC came by, and I've been talking to them about it. Ring, which is probably the perfect analog for us. We're really trying to do what Ring did, but for cars, a little bit different. Ring launched on QVC, and they've stayed on QVC for like a decade. They do big numbers there. We weren't really thinking about QVC to start. We're going to really be all direct to consumer. But I think it could be a really fun avenue for us. So I'll tell you how it works, just the math, because I think you'll be fascinated. So QVC, to do something on QVC.
I know what it is, but what is QVC?
I don't even know what QVC stands for. Quality Value Channel.
But it's basically a channel where they pitch things, right? It's like there's a pitch man or somebody.
Yeah. So there's always a pitch man, and it's just infomercials. It's an entire channel of infomercials. That's all it is.
And for people,
if you watch Shark Tank, Lori Greiner is the queen of QVC. That's where lots of little like consumer products, tchotchkes, late night ads are done. And so they give you a big audience of people that like to see new products, new things being introduced, that watch it. And their goal is, every time they have a spot, their goal is to go sell as much product as possible. So you hire an aid, you can do it yourself. David and I could do an ad, or you can hire someone who's pretty good at moving product on there. Think of the Bob Vilas of the world that are just great at moving a specific product. We would go the route of hiring a pitch man, so it doesn't always look like David and I are the only guys working in the company. But it's fascinating. So QVC wants anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 of product committed to do any spot. So for us,
so the 150,000 worth of product, that's cost, right? Not retail.
No, that's
value.
So that's retail. So for us, that'd be 700 some units for us, depending on what we do there with the $200 device. So you have to ship it to them. You have to give them pre-shipped labels, all of that, so they can just ship it and make it easy. And then, so for us, our first production run is going to be like 3,000 units for July. And we've been selling pre-orders already. We started that around Black Friday. But QVC, for a brand new brand, Frankie, that no one's ever heard of the brand, and it's a brand new device too. So it's not like, oh, someone else is doing a webcam. Like when you hand our device to people and ask them, what is it? you get anything from like coffee bean grinder to cup warmer. Like people don't know what the hell it is because it's a one of a kind. It's an invention.
We'll have our crack staff use a couple of the images of Keep and show it during like while we're putting this out, because it's really a unique. I'm an investor and I talk to Ian about it all the time. Like I've seen it. It's pretty fascinating what it looks like.
One of our biggest investors too. We really appreciate you, Frank. You're a big swinger. But we, that device, on QVC, you need a good pitch man to kind of explain all the features. And there's a lot of features that it can do to protect your car. But they want $150,000 worth of inventory. And by the time so they want something like 35 to 37%. That's their take. So comparable to retail, that's like if you got on Best Buy's shelves, that's about what you do. And then you pay the agency to actually move the unit a commission of like 5 to 6 points. So on a $200 unit, you start doing the math on that. That's $82 of cost. Not to mention our bill of material is over $100. So you look at that and you say, why would you sell $150,000 at a loss? And our answer is pretty simple on a couple ways. One, we sell monitoring for these. So, if you want to self-monitor, it's $5 a month, or professional monitoring where we do all the monitoring, like a home alarm, is $20 a month. So we believe, we've done enough surveys, we believe that 80% of people would purchase the monitoring program. And in fact, we're not going to let you even buy it without the self-monitoring. So you have to buy one of them. But if that many people are interested in paying for the monitoring, we can sell our products at a loss. It's kind of like Tim McHenry and Cooper's Hawk with the wine club. He makes every restaurant cash flow positive immediately from the wine club. So
it's a business strategy. It's a loss leader that brings you to a continuity model. So they sell you something, and think about this, like almost everybody who's listening to this has been sold something similar, right? This incredible shiny object that is too good to be true for the price. And then the real value is that continuity. What continuity means is something that comes in every single month. I've got an uncle who owned like 18 Planet Fitness gyms. He sold almost all of them at the end of 2019. It was perfect timing. But they will charge you $9.99 a month for membership, which is really, really low for membership because they know you're not going to use it. And because you're just not willing to cancel it. That, in its simplest form, is what a continuity model is. Tim McHenry's Wine Club, most people don't even pick up the wine. Like the vast majority of people don't pick up the wine. So that's the thing that makes these businesses incredibly valuable, is that monthly. And then what also happens is when you sell, which you don't get into, I'm sure, you sell on a multiple based upon what comes in every single month. It makes the company insanely valuable.
It also, a big number that venture capitalists look at, and anyone looking to acquire us, which, our aspirations would be that, like a big company like Google or Apple or Amazon or someone like that would want to buy us one day. One, for our intellectual property, but two, we want to gobble up so much market share that they say, screw it, we're not going to build our own device, we're just going to buy you. Kind of like what Apple did with Beats. They went out and just bought someone who was already good, that had a great brand name.
And who bought Ring? Didn't Amazon buy Ring?
Amazon bought Ring, Google bought Nest, right? So all of these big companies kind of get gobbled up by other big companies if you do well enough, right? So these are big dreams that we have.
But that's the reason you go to a QVC and you take a loss, because if you get enough people talking about it,
so you're hitting on a great point. I could finish that thought, because I was about to say this. Even if we didn't have, let's say, Frankie, we didn't have a service model after the fact to make it work, I think you could still make an argument. It makes sense with a brand new brand to go get these into as many customers' hands as possible early.
Right. So I walk around my office. So security is really important for women. Like Ian and I are big dudes, right? I'm in real estate. Like this comes up a lot with real estate, with the RAR, the Association of Realtors, right? NAR, the National Association of Realtors. What they always talk about with women is safety. Like I'm not a dirtbag and I'm not a woman, so I don't think about it. But for women, it's like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be safe? How am I doing? Is anyone hiding around this corner? So I didn't know what Ring was. I didn't have a Ring alarm 5 years ago, but I had many women who worked here, and I would walk around the office and I constantly heard this dinging sound. And now that I have a Ring device, I have mine silenced. My wife has hers on. The point of the matter is like, it's a distinct sound where, you know, someone else is monitoring their front door. Someone just went by and you hear it. And what that becomes, it becomes something like you're paying a premium to be on QVC. So it becomes part of the subconscious that people were like, I must. It's kind of like something like Kleenex. Like it just becomes the brand. And like, that's the hope and goal, right? Is if like you can become the brand.
There's a lot of the same viral qualities of Ring. Ring grew so much because people shared the videos.
Right.
Look at this SOB stealing my Amazon box off of my porch. Like they didn't initially think that was going to be what drove it, but it's really what drove their popularity, is that wanting to know what's going on in your neighborhood. Like, my neighbor's car got broken into last night. Here, let me rewind the Ring tape and see if I can see what happened, because it goes next door and I could see, oh, there it is. And they share it. There's a lot of the same things with our product. We have an HD camera in it. Every event that happens, so it deters people that get right up on the window. They're getting ready to pull up on it'll see them and chirp at them, warn them, get away, but it also records, and it'll record every alarm event. So we think people will share some of those. Look out for this guy who was in our neighborhood last night. So getting back to the point of why would you be on QVC and lose money early? I think it makes a lot of sense, because our goal right now is to get these. We really believe in our product. We believe it's a great product, and it will actually, it will do what we're saying it's going to do, which is deter crime and make your car safer. The more people's hands we can get it into, the more talking they will do with their neighbors and say, we bought this keep. And then those people will buy at full price right off of our website. You get more pre-orders. So even if we didn't have the alarming, the monitoring, right now we're in a mode where we believe that the more of these we can get out into people's hands, the more they're going to share it, social proof. And, you know, one person in the neighborhood buys it, next thing you know, 10 have it in the neighborhood because the video caught one guy and they shared it with everyone. I said, how'd you get that video? Well, I bought this device, and now everyone buys it. It's kind of how Jenny and I got into Ring, is other people were sharing videos and talking about it. I didn't see some commercial that got me excited.
Right. And it's a lot. I mean, I've never built something that I wanted to go viral, right? Like I buy real estate as long as I have good real estate that keeps people safe and it provides shelter. It's a pretty low bar. But if you want to have something go viral, you have to think about these things and the strategies. There's a multitude of them. And it starts with having a great product. It starts with word of mouth. Like all these little things build up. And it's like a Q rating. It's very hard to understand what goes into a Q rating or a Nielsen rating. But the point is, the popular stuff gets talked about, the water cooler. You're walking around the office now and your cell phone tells you who is involved with something because it just rings and makes a distinct sound. So it's really interesting stuff.
I think, you know, you asked about CES. So, you know, QVC is just that. I'm just giving you one little example. A whole bunch of distributors talk to us that want to carry our product. Another way to get things out, right? You get
distributors
guys,
like what? Like a Home Depot or
like car electronics guys that sell different gadgets that go into cars. They sell directly to auto dealers. We had a whole bunch of different people with smaller YouTube channels interview David or I over the course of 3 days, that those are starting to get put up there, and you're starting to get, like, our mailing list has been growing a lot since we did this. So exposure was a big piece of it for us.
Part of business, for people who don't own a business, part of business is like connective tissue, right? And what I mean by this, I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent, I'm taking like 90 seconds, but a lot of businesses are kind of like yard sales. There's just shit everywhere. There's like dolls next to VCRs, next to old tools. It just isn't organized. And what you start to realize is there's connective tissue that holds things together at successful businesses. Like the Amazons, the Apples of the world, they have a very distinct product. For those of us that aren't that big, we have just stuff that holds us together and it connects everything. I have property management, I have construction. Those things have connective tissue called managers who hold them all together. But what Ian is talking about right now with social media, the connective tissue to that is that podcast we did earlier about, it was a two-parter for us. And we only did like 70 episodes at this point. 2 of those 70 are dedicated to, well, 4 of those 70 are dedicated to meeting Shaq, meeting Gary Vaynerchuk. Like those are pieces that are part of the connective tissue of the story of not only our podcast, but of Keep, because those are little things you start to do and you don't know which ones are going to work and which ones aren't going to work. But you've got to put enough lines out into the water as a business owner to have enough people who connect the dots. And one of the funny things, like it may go nowhere, but Gary Vee and Shaq know each other. They've actually talked and it's made it back to Ian. So like these little things about getting stuck in Mexico, that's why getting stuck in Mexico fucking matters. Because if you're stuck in Mexico, your number one sales guy is at a pool at the Viceroy spending $1,000 a night. What he isn't doing is getting in front of people who can help us get this device in front of the right people and then make the right choices. Because David is an engineer. He's got a bunch of engineers behind him. He brought Ian in because Ian is a specialist. He's a business guy who can sell. We've talked about it here over and over again. And that's why the stakes are so high.
But also, so Frankie, today, 2022, do you have access to deals you didn't have access to in 2012?
Yes.
Why?
So a lot of it is because I think where you're going with this, I don't know where you're going with it, but I think it's because of this. My life drastically changed when I got on television. So when I went to TV, people knew who I was. I showed up places, they're like, oh, hey, Frank. That's part of it. My footprint, my number of signs that are all over the place. Like literally there's hundreds of our signs all over Richmond at any given time. And I also have a guy who follows me around with a camera like 3 days a week. So because of those things, I'm in people's conscience and in their heads. And because I spend so much money on marketing and television, we have an incredible track record, but also we're on the offensive with our content. And because of that, people will say, oh, we want to give it to this guy. There's a 27 unit deal we're looking at, a 50 unit deal, 300 unit deal. Those didn't used to find me. Now they find us.
It's the same reason that some senators get voted in every 4 years for 50 years because of name recognition, brand.
Right.
It's a trusted name. So whether someone's worked with you or not, they see your signs everywhere. You've now closed hundreds and hundreds of deals in Richmond, whereas before you closed a few. Now, right. and I also think this is really important. You go out of your way not to screw people. You will lose money on a deal if it means just everyone's happy at the end of it because it doesn't matter in the long run. And so if you think about Frank has access today, it's easy to do business with Frank today. 4 years ago, it was a leap to jump into a commercial real estate deal with me. I've now delivered a lot of money to a bunch of people that for them, it's no longer a leap. They're asking me, what's the next thing you're looking for? Whereas in 4 years ago, you were kind of out there because I wasn't sure I knew what I was doing. And I think it's the same with a tech startup. When someone comes to our website, they have a problem. Someone's messed with their car. Maybe it's been broken into. They're aware of car theft, and maybe they've seen a social media ad or a post that I've done somewhere. But when they get there, one thing they don't know is, are we a credible company? Who are these guys? Is this a fly by night? Am I going to send my credit card information to someone? They never send me a unit. Who are they? And so one thing David and I are trying really hard to do is, before we even have products in front of people, which is number one, that's the number one way we can build credibility, is you come to our website, we have 30 videos of people talking about how the night stopped a thief from getting into their car and how they sleep better at night parking in their parking garage versus before. That number one, that beats everything. But for us, little things like if you come to our website, you see the pictures, you see the features, you got all the copy that I've written on there. You know, you've got David doing, some of his demos. But the number one thing we can do is show that we're credible. And so right now, how do you do that? You show your booth at CES. We spent some money. We were highlighted at CES. Here's us interviewing with a couple of the lead people that do CES Eureka Park. Here's us at TechCrunch Disrupt. In the pitch competition, we were voted a top 20 finalist. Those things really make a difference when someone comes and they're trying to decide, do I give $200 to this company, which is a lot of money, for a connected car alarm? Are they credible? And it's the same reason why you get deals today you didn't get in 2012, because you didn't have a track record. It wasn't that you weren't credible. You didn't have name recognition. So who is it? No one cares you worked at Ryan Homes for 15 years. What have you done in Richmond? Now it's 10 years later. It's like, oh yeah, that guy's everywhere. I know that name. I can work with him in a second.
So we got to wrap this up. but in order to wrap it up, I'll leave you with a thought and then you can close us. What I talk about in the course of my business, every Monday, I do a state of the company. It's Frank's state of the company, right? And I kind of go over where we are, what we're doing, and all of that. And what I learned when I was in my low 20s, one of my bosses told me, he's like, you're out in the field building houses. I'm somewhere between 6 weeks and 3 months ahead of you because I'm in the office. So I'm seeing the things that are in the office. And then the guy who was the vice president running the department was 6 months to 12 months ahead of that production manager who is managing me. That's what's happening. That's what I do inside of my business every day. I don't think about where we are. When there's a problem, I deal with where we are. But what I deal with is 90 days from now, 180 days from now, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and where we're going. And what Ian is talking about is alignment, getting in there, building credibility. But what he isn't saying, which causes as much strife and as much thought, is where not to be. Where do we not want to spend our time? What do we not want to be associated with? What's a waste of our time? Someone like QVC is not a waste of time for the reasons we said. But other people are pitching and saying, that's not for us. It's not the right brand. It's not the right direction. I deal with this all the time as the owner of the business. And that's what Ian and David are doing. It's producing a great product, aligning themselves and saying no to a lot.
Yep, I think you said that right. So that was, it was a great first approach for us at CES to really launch. The last thing I'll just say is it's really humbling, Frankie. You go, David's had a lot of success. I've had lots of different success. I've been at kind of higher levels. You go to these trade shows where no one's ever heard of you, and you're right back to work in a booth. You are shaking hands. You are showing the device. I'm a pitch man. My elevator pitch from the first person that walked into our booth to the 400th that I talked to is so much crisper now. I can get it out of my mouth in less than 30 seconds, what the hell our device does, and do it. The practice was great. Just getting people's reactions. What features did they react to? Which ones did they have a visceral reaction to? What did they get emotional about? Features I used to get jazzed about that they didn't, and ones that I wasn't as excited about that they would be like, that's incredible. All of those little things are instructive when you're starting a business. So for me, literally begging people to come to your booth, you're back to being a fraternity guy, trying to ask girls to come sit at your table and play beer pong with you. That's where you were.
Those pledge chairman days really helped you out.
100%. They did.
Not only that, thank God you had those hand hundos that got you out of Mexico, that got you to Vegas, so you, Ian Mathews, could be a super spreader.
I thought to myself, I'm in a bad predicament. I'm stuck in Mexico. I need to be in Vegas. What would Frankie do? And I said, you know what? I'm going to pull out the hundos. That always gets Frank out of trouble no matter what's going on. Frankie would be greasing everyone he came across right now. His ass would not still be in Mexico. Ian, you're not working hard enough. Frank would have bought his way out of here by now.
Ian, here's a couple $100. I'm ready to end this episode.
See ya, homie.
All right, bro.